Hello, everyone. Hello. Today we're going to be talking about how to support your student during their first year here at Rio Hondo College during the RoadRunner Welcome Week. There are different ways that we can help you kind of understand how you can support your student during their first year here at Rio Hondo College. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about some tips that we can provide you all in regards to knowing exactly how you can provide your student, especially in regards to a timeline and also important dates for students. We're also going to be talking about some barriers that students typically face, especially during their first year, but this can also be common throughout their entire time in college. And then finally, we're going to be talking about some information for parents and the information that we are allowed to share with you all as parents. So let me go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Veronica, and I am a student success coach with the Student Success and Dream Center. I am a Rio Hondo College alumni. I did graduate a few years ago, and I'm here to continuing to work at Rio Hondo College just because I love the students and I love helping students, especially as they progress through their first year. And so we're here today to, help you all as parents also kind of begin that transitioning process from having a high school student to now having a college student. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we do with the Student Success and Dream Center and how we help your students. So the first thing we do is we usually do help students make appointments with counselors for educational planning. And what this means is basically we have students meet with the counselors to help them develop that educational plan, which is basically a schedule of classes that students have for their entire time at Rio Hondo College. So we usually begin with the first semester, usually beginning in the fall, and then eventually students can come back and make a full 2 to 3 year plan with us. That way we know exactly how long the student is going to be with us at Rio Hondo College and make sure that they are being successful. We do help students apply for college because a lot of our students are first generation college students or don't have siblings to kind of help them with that process. And so we do help students in the full application process, kind of showing them exactly where to find certain things on our website, and also with helping them register for classes. So once the students meet with the counselors to develop that educational plan, then they come right back to us, and then we walk them through the process of looking up classes, days, times, how to identify specific classes, books, instructors, and everything that they need. And then we help them through that registration process. And it's really beneficial to have us there because we get to see if there's any issues registering, then we can troubleshoot with them right away. And if anything, send them back to the counselor to provide some additional support. So we are one center that kind of does all of that registration support. We also do help with financial aid applications. And so this can either be with the FAFSA application or with the California DREAM Act. And we do walk the students step by step. And so we have different ways that we help students, both through the phone, through a Zoom room, or also through a chat feature as well, whatever the student feels most comfortable with and will also make it easier. So we do work with parents, and usually when it comes to the financial aid applications, because students usually do use the parents' financial tax information and whatnot. So we do help students through that process. And then finally, we also do provide success workshops. I just realized I spelled that wrong. Pause. We also do help students with success workshops, and we have those throughout the entire year. We'll usually during the fall and spring semesters, and we have different success workshops throughout each part of the semester that we feel students will benefit from. So for example, in the beginning of that term, we do have a syllabi analysis workshop that helps students basically break down the different syllabi that they have from the various classes that they're taking and how we can combine them all together and look and point out important dates. Then towards the middle or towards the end of the semester, we do have test taking anxiety workshops, which students really benefit from because a lot of students do notice that their anxiety builds up, especially as finals are coming around. So we do try to make sure that our workshops are tailored specifically for specific times during the semester when we feel students would benefit most from them. So how do you support your student, or how can you support your student? The first thing we have to pay attention to is to pay attention to the important dates of the semester and of the academic year. So the term does begin in August. So that's when fall classes do begin, usually in late August. So this is important just because the classes begin in late August. You have the earlier August or even the months before to really help you and your student prepare for when classes begin, right? So this can include, purchasing books or purchasing supplies that might be needed, kind of thinking ahead. So if your student is going to be taking classes in person this upcoming semester, kind of thinking about transportation and what that's going to look like, if there's going to be a commute or a bus, however the student is going to be getting there, right? And so that's important for you all to kind of start thinking about. That way we make sure that your student is able to show up to classes on the first day of class in person. And if it's going to be taking place online, then, start thinking about technology and what that's going to look like as well. September, nothing really much happens. And then in October, the financial aid application does open up. So again, that's both the California DREAM Act and the FAFSA applications. Both do open up in October. And we'll talk about the deadline in just a second, but that's just an important date because we prefer to have students apply sooner rather than later, just so we can guarantee that the application goes through and is submitted before the deadline. In November, we do have students register for spring courses. So that's when courses begin both in January and February. And so that is important just to make sure that our students are continuing and ensuring that they are progressing through and have a registration and a graduation timeline that works with everyone. And so this is usually when students come back to our office and really try to schedule appointments with counselors once again to discuss what classes to take in the spring semester. And in December, we do have our final exams. So this is important just so that you all are aware of like the time and studying space that students need during that final push of the semester, right? And it's also important to know exactly when final exams end or when the semester ends. That way, in case you all are planning any vacations or some time off, make sure that, it's after the student has finished their fall term. In January, we do have a mini session where winter courses begin. Winter courses are usually only about a month long during the month of January. And so these classes are really fast paced, but some students do opt in to take a winter course just to make sure that, they can get ahead or take an extra class if needed. So that's usually where students are at. So just as an FYI, we do have some winter classes available. And then in February, the spring semester begins. And again, you can use the month of January to really prep again for what spring semester is going to look like. And this can really be important, and kind of debriefing with the student and asking them, how was your fall semester? Was 12 units too much? Was 15 units too much? Do we need to take a step back? Or can we move forward? Was the student working during the fall semester and did that impact their studies? And if so, again, kind of doing that troubleshooting, right? And seeing exactly what we need to adjust for that spring semester. In March, we do have the application for financial aid closing. So it does begin in October, and we do have up until March 2nd to fill out those financial aid applications. So we usually, again, prefer students to submit them earlier rather than later, just to make sure that the applications are in, because our office does tend to get very, very busy during that March or really close to that March 2nd deadline. And, instead of having your student wait quite some time for us to help them, it's better if we get those applications done out of the way and make sure that those applications are in. During March, we also do have registration for summer courses. So if your student chooses to get ahead and take a couple extra classes during the summer, that is when registration does happen. Sometimes summer can also be used to repeat a class that maybe students didn't do so well in, or if they drop a class during either of the semesters, that's usually where students have the opportunity to, make up the class and still be on track for graduation. During April, we do have spring break, and that can either be a few days or a week off, depending on every year. So that is just as an FYI, to know exactly when we do have that spring break, in case you're planning some time off, again, very similar to December, just to make sure that it doesn't interfere with your students' schedules and classes. And in May, we do have our final exams for that spring semester and also registration for the fall courses. So again, even though it is a few months ahead, you got to kind of start thinking about what classes the student is going to be taking in the fall, whether they're going to be taking summer classes or not, and again, planning, right? So it's all about planning for the entire year. And in July and summer, June and July, students do have the opportunity to, again, take summer classes and either get ahead or prepare for the fall semester. Other ways that you can help your students is with food. And this is funny and ironic, but it is important to so that it's a small way of showing that you're supporting your student and that you're there for them and that you're caring for them. And especially with this and virtual environment, if possible, if you're able to bring a cup of coffee or tea in the mornings to your student to help them wake up, energize them, including breakfast or any healthy meal, really, that can be very important and it shows that you're caring for your student, that you don't want to distract your student by them having to make their own food, right? You're bringing them over to you. And healthy meals is especially important during that term in the semester, especially during finals. We've seen multiple instances where students kind of forget to eat during the final exam periods because they're studying 24/7. They're staying up really, really late, or, when waking up really early just to get those extra few minutes of studying in. So healthy meals can be very important to make sure that your student's brain is energized and is on track to be able to tackle those final exams. So with food, it's a great way of showing your support for your student. Similarly with space, especially a couple of things that can happen. So especially during exam season, especially when students are studying, when students get into that grind of studying, you really don't want to be a distraction, or see if it's possible for you to avoid any distractions. And we'll talk about a little bit more about distractions in just a second. But also during classes, especially again during this remote learning environment. So the last thing we want is for students to feel distracted with other things going on around the house. So usually when we're saying during classes, try to make sure that students are present during class as much as possible. And that's one way that you can help them, right? By providing them that space for them to learn. And with support. And the way that you can do this is words of encouragement. And for me, this is kind of like a couple of different ways. It can be as a congratulations, you finished an exam. I saw you studying all week for it. So congratulations on finishing it, especially if they get a good grade back, or after finishing a semester or a specific class, right? Like encouraging them and letting them know that they're one step closer to graduation, one step closer to their goal. So I think all of these can be different ways for you all to support your students during their first year, and also continuing through their college career as well. So it is important for you all to help eliminate distractions as much as possible for your students. And I did have a smartphone here because I do understand that with social media, students can get distracted on their own. But sometimes, if you see students paying too much attention to their phone and not really as much time studying, that is where you can kind of come in and just point it out, right? And say, hey, I noticed you haven't studied today, or did you go attend class today? I haven't seen you do that. So just if it's possible in any which way, try to eliminate distractions. And that can include not only just like the technology piece, but also with family outings, right? There are going to be some weekends where students aren't going to be able to, attend a family party or a family outing, or go on a weekend getaway because, midterms, or even if it's having a paper that's due that's coming up, students aren't always going to be available to do that. And so trying to, still include the students, but also respecting their time and space and education as well. So if possible, try to eliminate any distractions. And I've also seen this with siblings, right? Sometimes siblings will be watching TV a little too loud, or kind of come in and out of the room just because they're used to doing that. So kind of trying to think about or brainstorming all of the different ways or different distractions that might come up, just so that we can go ahead and eliminate those from the beginning. And so similarly with that, we're going to talk about some barriers that hinder student success. So number one was distractions, right? That is important, especially again, when final exams come around, or when we have those really stressful periods of the semester, that can really be important for students, and it can make or break a grade or a paper. So that's just something to keep in mind. In regards to employment, we have seen that students who are enrolled full-time, which is considered 12 units or more, it does become more difficult for them to have, full-time employment, and to also be successful when it comes to their classes. So being a full-time student, the reason why it's called being full-time is because it does take up approximately about 40 hours a week. And that's both in classes, with readings, with assignments, and with studying time as well. So that's why it is called full-time student status. And so usually when we have full-time students, it does become difficult to, work anything more than usually 20 hours a week. So it is important that if your student is going to be working or looking for employment, just know that how that can impede their studies, right? And so just kind of being cognizant of that and trying to pay attention to, are you working too many hours this week and how is that going to impact your studies, right? We definitely don't want their studies to be impacted because of employment. The next thing we want to talk about is with technology, especially again with this remote learning environment, right? So does your student have that technology to be able to be in classes or to, conduct their assignments, to do anything that they need? And that includes both internet access and a computer access if possible. And so what we will say is that we understand that not everyone is able to afford, appropriate technology sometimes. So Rio Hondo College does offer a hotspot and laptop loans to students during the semesters. And so students can sign up for that to make sure that they are able to enroll in classes and to attend classes as well during this remote environment. And because we will be having we will be reopening campus with some percentage during the fall semester, students can go onto campus and begin to, utilize library services such as the computers for classes and things. So it is important to kind of start thinking about that technology access and make sure that students have that. And then in regards to studying techniques and habits, every student is different when it comes to studying, and especially when it comes to the different material that they're studying. So some students are completely okay with having, or with studying at a Starbucks or at a local coffee shop where there's noise making and there's music playing, there's a lot of people around. That works for some students, and that actually helps for many students, including myself. However, there are other students who need complete silence in order to make sure that they are studying appropriately and that they're retaining all of the information. And so these students usually typically prefer to go to a library where it's completely silent, there's not many distractions around. And so kind of paying attention to the different studying techniques that your student is doing and see if it's working for them, right? Try checking in on them and seeing if there's too many distractions at home, so we can maybe shift places and maybe take them to the library, like I said. And so trying to see exactly what your students' studying techniques are and how we can adjust and make sure that it is working for the student in the future. And so now some information for you all to know about the information that we can provide you all. So there is a law in place. It is called FERPA, which stands for Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Basically what this means is that the student does have a right to privacy. And so with that, we actually cannot provide you all as parents a lot of information about your student specifically. So we cannot provide, for example, if you call our office and you ask, I want to make sure that my student, registered for classes. We cannot verify that information with you all. If you ever try to reach out to an instructor and try to see how your student is doing in a class, we also can't provide you all with that information. So it is a law in place. And so don't, it's not like we're doing this on purpose, right? It's not because we're bad people. There is a law in place. And so we are limited in the information that we can provide you all. However, we can provide you all with general information. And so what that means is, we can't tell you whether your student specifically has registered for classes, but we can provide you a general information and say registration begins on this date. So if your student has registered for classes since then, then that's on you to kind of know. Similarly, when it comes to, classes, right, we can't tell you whether your student has enrolled in a specific class, but we can say, typically students do register for an English class during their first semester. But again, we cannot tell you specifics about your student. Usually when we do get to work with parents, it does tend to happen around financial aid application season because we do require your financial aid taxes to submit those financial aid applications. So usually we'll work with you, or we work with the student in conjunction with you to help you all fill out those financial aid applications. And so if at any point the student does actually want to share information with you all in regards to their academic records, basically there is a form with our admissions and records office that the student can fill out to give you all that access to see their educational records. But the student does have to fill out this form and submit it to our admissions and records office. Without that form, we are very limited in the information that we can provide you all in regards to a student. So I did just kind of want to share that information with you all, just as an FYI, in case you're ever trying to contact us. And you can say you can provide us with your student ID number and everything, but we cannot really provide you all with any specific information unless there is that specific form on file. So with that does conclude our presentation. I did want to thank you all for, taking the time to not only be in this presentation, but also to join us for RoadRunner Welcome Week. It is important and it shows your dedication to your student success to have you all join us through this event. If you do have any questions, you can feel free to contact us through our phone line. Our phone number is 562-463-6650, or you can also hop onto our Zoom, and I did provide the link there, or also on our chat feature on our website. You're welcome to contact us through any of this, but again, keeping in mind that law that is in place, we are limited in the information that we can tell you about specifics about your student. So we thank you again for taking the time to come to our workshop, and we will see you soon. Have a great rest of your day.